Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had always been different from other women her age. While her college friends were planning weekend parties, she was completing her third marathon before sunrise. While they worried about dating and career choices, she was already halfway through one of the most grueling military training programs in the world. The Navy SEAL training had transformed her from a determined young woman into something far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Her childhood in a small Texas town had been anything but ordinary. Growing up as the daughter of a Marine Corps veteran, Sarah learned early that strength wasn't just about physical power. Her father, Sergeant Major Rodriguez Martinez, had taught her that true strength came from mental resilience, quick thinking, and the ability to remain calm when everything around you was falling apart. These lessons would prove more valuable than she could have ever anticipated. The day that would change everything started like any other at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center. Sarah was in her final weeks of SEAL qualification training, one of only 3 women to make it this far in the program's history. The instructors had pushed every candidate to their absolute limits. But Sarah had something that set her apart from the others. She possessed an almost supernatural ability to read people and situations, a skill that had been honed through years of military training and real-world combat experience. As she walked across the training compound that morning, Sarah noticed the unusual tension in the air. Groups of male cadets were whispering among themselves, casting glances in her direction. Some of them had never fully accepted that a woman could earn her place among the elite SEAL teams. They saw her presence as a political statement rather than recognition of her exceptional abilities. What they didn't understand was that Sarah had already proven herself in ways that most of them never would. The training facility buzzed with nervous energy as cadets prepared for their final evaluation exercises. Sarah had excelled in every phase of training, from the brutal physical conditioning to the complex tactical scenarios. Her instructors had noted her exceptional marksmanship skills, her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, and her natural leadership qualities. But perhaps most importantly, they had observed her uncanny ability to assess threats and react with lightning-fast precision. During her previous deployment in Afghanistan, Sarah had served with distinction as a Navy intelligence specialist before applying for SEAL training. She had been involved in several high-stakes operations where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. Her commanding officers had repeatedly praised her situational awareness and her ability to remain focused when chaos erupted around her. These experiences had shaped her into someone who could read danger like others read books. The morning briefing revealed that the day's exercise would involve a complex hostage rescue scenario. Teams of cadets would take turns playing both hostages and rescue operatives, with instructors evaluating their tactical decision-making under pressure. Sarah's team had been assigned to play the role of hostages first, which meant they would be bound and positioned in a mock building while other teams attempted to rescue them. What the instructors didn't know was that a group of male cadets had decided to use this exercise as an opportunity to test Sarah in their own way. They had grown tired of her consistent high performance and wanted to see if they could break her composure. Their plan was simple but dangerous. During the exercise, when weapons were supposed to contain only blank ammunition, they would aim directly at her head and pull the trigger to see if they could make her flinch. The cadets had convinced themselves that this was just harmless hazing, a way to prove that Sarah didn't belong among them. They had no idea that their target was someone who had survived actual combat situations. Someone whose training had conditioned her to respond to genuine threats with lethal efficiency. They were about to learn that there were some people you simply never tried to intimidate, and Sarah Martinez was definitely one of them. As the exercise began and Sarah took her position as a mock hostage, she felt the familiar heightening of her senses that always preceded danger. Her breathing became controlled and deliberate. Her muscles relaxed yet ready to explode into action. Years of training had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct was telling her that something was wrong. The atmosphere felt different, more charged with real tension than a training exercise should generate. She had no way of knowing that in just a few minutes, her life would be threatened by people she had trusted as fellow service members. But Sarah Martinez was a Navy SEAL, and Navy SEALs were trained to expect the unexpected and respond accordingly. The mock building where the hostage scenario would take place was a concrete structure designed to simulate real-world rescue operations. Sarah and 5 other cadets were led inside and positioned in different rooms, their hands loosely bound with training restraints that could be quickly removed in an emergency. The building's layout included multiple entry points, stairwells, and hiding spots that would challenge the rescue team's tactical planning and execution. Sarah found herself seated in a chair in what appeared to be a makeshift office, complete with a desk, filing cabinets, and a window overlooking the training yard. Her position gave her a clear view of the door and most of the room, which satisfied her automatic need to maintain situational awareness even during training exercises. The restraints on her wrists were loose enough that she could free herself within seconds if necessary, though the exercise rules prohibited hostages from actively resisting their captors. Outside, she could hear the muffled voices of instructors briefing the rescue teams on their mission parameters. The exercise was designed to test multiple skills simultaneously: the rescue team's ability to gather intelligence, plan their approach, execute precise movements under pressure, and make split-second decisions when confronted with potentially hostile situations. For the hostages, the challenge was to remain calm and avoid interfering with the tactical operation. What Sarah didn't know was that Cadet James Morrison and two of his friends had volunteered for the first rescue team specifically to target her. Morrison was a former Marine who had struggled to accept that a woman could outperform him in almost every aspect of SEAL training. His ego had been bruised repeatedly as Sarah consistently scored higher on physical fitness tests, demonstrated superior marksmanship, and showed better tactical judgment than he did. Morrison had convinced Cadets Williams and Thompson to join his plan by appealing to their shared frustration with what they saw as preferential treatment for female candidates. They believed that the military's push for gender integration was compromising the standards that made Special Operations Forces elite. In their minds, scaring Sarah during the exercise would expose her as unfit for SEAL duty and prove their point about women in combat roles. The three cadets had modified their weapons before the exercise, ensuring that their rifles contained blank ammunition, but removing the bright orange barrel plugs that clearly identified training weapons. This violation of safety protocols was serious enough to result in immediate dismissal from the program, but they were confident they wouldn't be caught. Their plan was to enter Sarah's room, point their weapons directly at her head, and fire blanks from close range to see if they could break her composure. As the exercise officially began, Sarah heard the first rescue team moving through the building. Their footsteps were heavier than they should have been for a stealth operation, and their communication was unnecessarily loud. Any real hostage-taker would have heard them coming from several rooms away. Sarah recognized the voices as belonging to Morrison's group, and something about their tone made her increasingly uneasy. Her military training had taught her to pay attention to details that others might miss. The way Morrison's team was moving suggested they weren't following standard rescue protocols. Instead of the careful, methodical approach that SEAL tactics demanded, they seemed to be rushing toward a specific target. Sarah realized with growing concern that she might be that target. The sound of boots in the hallway grew closer, and Sarah could hear whispered conversations that didn't match the professional communication she expected from a rescue operation. There was an undercurrent of excitement in their voices, the kind of anticipation that suggested they were planning something beyond the scope of the exercise. Sarah's combat instincts began to activate as she recognized the signs of an approaching threat. When the door to her room suddenly burst open, Sarah saw Morrison and his two teammates enter with their weapons raised. But instead of the controlled, professional movements she expected from a rescue team, their body language suggested aggression rather than protection. Morrison's face wore an expression of anticipation rather than the focused concentration of a professional operator. The three cadets positioned themselves around Sarah's chair, with Morrison directly in front of her and the other two flanking her sides. Their weapons were pointed at her, which was unusual for a hostage rescue scenario where the rescuers should be securing the room and checking for threats rather than targeting the hostages themselves. Sarah's years of combat experience told her that something was very wrong with this situation. Morrison stepped closer, bringing his rifle barrel to within inches of Sarah's forehead. The weapon was shaking slightly in his hands, betraying his nervousness despite his attempt to appear confident. Sarah could see the malice in his eyes, the desire to humiliate her in front of his friends and prove that she didn't belong among them. What he couldn't see was the cold calculation that had replaced any fear in Sarah's mind. In that moment, Sarah's training took over completely. Her breathing became deeper and more controlled, Her muscles relaxed while simultaneously preparing for explosive action. Every SEAL learned to function in life or death situations, and Sarah's experience had taught her that the greatest threats often came from the most unexpected sources. She was no longer thinking about training exercises or military protocols. She was thinking about survival. Time seemed to slow down as Sarah assessed the threat before her. Morrison's finger was moving toward the trigger of his weapon, and the expression on his face made it clear that he intended to pull it while the barrel was pointed directly at her head. In his mind, firing blank ammunition at close range would create a loud noise and flash that would terrify her, hopefully causing her to scream, cry, or show some other sign of weakness that would validate his belief that women didn't belong in special operations. What Morrison didn't understand was that Sarah had faced real weapons pointed at her head before. During her deployment in Afghanistan, she had been captured briefly by insurgents who had pressed loaded rifles against her skull while interrogating her. She had maintained her composure then, giving only her name, rank, and service number despite the genuine threat to her life. The memory of that experience flooded back now, but instead of fear, it brought clarity and determination. Sarah's body was already moving before her conscious mind had fully processed the threat. Years of close-quarters combat training had conditioned her muscles to react automatically when faced with a weapon at close range. The restraints around her wrists, which had been loosely applied for the training exercise, snapped apart as she explosively launched herself forward from the chair. Her movement was faster than any of the three cadets had anticipated. In one fluid motion, Sarah grabbed Morrison's rifle barrel with her left hand and twisted it away from her head, while simultaneously driving her right elbow into his solar plexus. The impact drove the air from his lungs and caused him to double over, but Sarah wasn't finished. Her training had taught her that when facing multiple opponents with weapons, speed and aggression were essential for survival. Before Williams could react to what was happening, Sarah had pivoted and delivered a devastating kick to his knee that sent him crashing to the ground. His weapon clattered across the floor as he instinctively reached for his injured leg. Thompson tried to bring his rifle to bear on Sarah, but she was already inside his effective range. A sharp elbow strike to his throat, followed by a knee to his midsection, left him gasping and unable to fight back. The entire sequence had taken less than 5 seconds. 3 armed men who had intended to intimidate and humiliate Sarah now found themselves disarmed and disabled by someone they had underestimated completely. Morrison was still struggling to breathe. Williams was writhing on the floor, holding his knee, and Thompson was clutching his throat while trying to remain upright. Sarah quickly secured all 3 weapons, checking each one to ensure they were indeed loaded with blanks rather than live ammunition. The discovery that they had removed the safety markings from their rifles confirmed her suspicion that this had been a planned attempt to threaten her outside the bounds of the training exercise. The violation of weapons safety protocols was serious enough to end their military careers, and Sarah now had evidence of their intent. The sound of the confrontation had alerted the instructors monitoring the exercise. Within moments, the room was filled with senior training staff who quickly assessed the situation. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the lead instructor for the exercise, took one look at the 3 disabled cadets and the weapons scattered around the room before turning his attention to Sarah. "Martinez, report," he commanded in a voice that demanded immediate and accurate information. Sarah stood at attention, her breathing already returning to normal despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "Chief, these 3 cadets entered my position with weapons pointed directly at my person, in a manner inconsistent with rescue protocols. When Cadet Morrison placed his weapon against my head and appeared to be preparing to discharge it, I responded according to my training for close-quarters threat neutralization." Chief Rodriguez examined the weapons Sarah had secured, immediately noticing the missing safety markings that should have identified them as training weapons. His expression darkened as he realized the severity of what had nearly occurred. Pointing blank ammunition directly at someone's head from close range could cause permanent hearing damage, burns, or even serious eye injuries from the muzzle blast. "Did any of these cadets communicate their intentions to you before taking these actions?" Rodriguez asked. "Negative, Chief. Their behavior was consistent with a hostile threat rather than a training exercise." The 3 cadets were still recovering from Sarah's defensive actions, but Morrison managed to struggle to his feet. "Chief, we were just trying to test her reaction under pressure. It was supposed to be part of the exercise." Rodriguez's voice could have cut steel when he responded. Cadet Morrison, at no point in your briefing were you instructed to point weapons at hostages, remove safety markings from training weapons, or conduct unauthorized psychological testing on fellow service members. You and your teammates have violated multiple safety protocols and endangered the life of another candidate. As medical personnel arrived to check on the 3 injured cadets, Sarah realized that her reaction had probably saved more than just her own safety. If Morrison had succeeded in firing blank ammunition at her head from close range, the muzzle blast could have caused permanent injury. Her training had protected not only herself, but had prevented a training accident that could have ended someone's career and caused lasting physical harm. The incident was far from over. But Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction that her years of preparation had served her well when it mattered most. She had proven that she belonged among the elite, not through words or politics, but through her ability to handle a genuine threat with the skill and composure that defined a true warrior. The training facility's medical bay became the center of attention as the 3 injured cadets received treatment for their various injuries. Williams required immediate attention for his damaged knee, which had suffered ligament damage from Sarah's precisely delivered kick. Thompson was being treated for what appeared to be a bruised larynx, making it difficult for him to speak clearly. Morrison had recovered enough to walk, but the bruising across his midsection served as a visible reminder of how quickly the situation had turned against him. Word of the incident spread rapidly through the training compound, creating a buzz of conversation among the remaining SEAL candidates. Most of them had heard rumors about Morrison's attitude towards Sarah's presence in the program, but few had imagined he would take such drastic action. The fact that a female candidate had single-handedly disabled 3 armed men sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of aspiring SEALs. Captain Jennifer Hayes, the commanding officer overseeing the SEAL training program, arrived at the medical facility within an hour of the incident. She had built her career on maintaining the highest standards of professionalism and safety, and the events of the morning represented a serious breach of both. As one of the first women to achieve senior leadership in naval special warfare, she understood the unique pressures that Sarah faced as a female candidate. The investigation that followed was thorough and swift. Security cameras throughout the training facility had captured portions of the incident, including the cadets' preparation in the equipment room, where they had removed the safety markings from their weapons. Audio recordings from the monitoring system had picked up their conversations discussing their plan to test Sarah's composure through intimidation. Captain Hayes interviewed each participant separately, starting with Sarah. In the privacy of her office, the captain's demeanor was professional but supportive. Lieutenant Martinez, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened from your perspective, including your assessment of the threat level you perceived. Sarah provided a detailed account of the events, explaining how the cadets' behavior had deviated from standard rescue protocols and how their body language had indicated hostile intent rather than protective action. She described her decision-making process and the specific techniques she had used to neutralize what she perceived as a genuine threat to her safety. In your professional opinion, was this a legitimate training scenario or something else? Captain Hayes asked. Ma'am, based on my experience in combat situations and hostage rescue operations, their actions were consistent with a planned attack rather than a rescue attempt. The removal of safety markings, the aggressive positioning, and the deliberate targeting of a hostage all indicated hostile intent. When Captain Hayes interviewed Morrison, his story was significantly different. He claimed that they had intended to create a realistic stress test to prepare Sarah for the psychological pressure of real combat situations. He insisted that their actions were motivated by a desire to ensure she could handle the mental demands of SEAL operations, not by any personal animosity. However, the recorded conversations told a different story. Audio from the equipment room clearly captured Morrison telling his teammates, "Let's see if we can make the princess cry. If she can't handle a little scare, she has no business wearing our uniform." These words, combined with the physical evidence of weapons tampering, painted a picture of deliberate harassment rather than legitimate training. The medical evaluation of the 3 injured cadets revealed the extent of Sarah's precision and control. Williams' knee injury was serious but would heal completely with proper treatment. Thompson's throat injury was painful but not life-threatening. Morrison's bruised ribs would cause discomfort for several weeks but required no special treatment. In each case, Sarah had delivered exactly enough force to neutralize the threat without causing permanent damage. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the base psychologist, was brought in to evaluate the psychological impact of the incident on all parties involved. Her assessment of Sarah was particularly interesting, as it revealed someone who had processed the traumatic event with remarkable emotional stability. Sarah's combat experience had prepared her not just physically but mentally for violent encounters. Lieutenant Martinez shows no signs of post-traumatic stress or emotional disturbance from the incident, Dr. Coleman reported to Captain Hayes. Her reaction was consistent with someone who has been properly trained to handle life-threatening situations. If anything, she appears more confident and resolved than before the incident occurred. The psychological evaluation of Morrison and his teammates revealed a different picture. All three showed signs of shame and regret, but Morrison in particular seemed to be struggling with the realization that his actions could have ended his military career. The man who had thought he was exposing Sarah's weakness had instead revealed his own character flaws and poor judgment. As the investigation continued, testimonies from other cadets began to emerge. Several candidates came forward to report that Morrison had made derogatory comments about female service members throughout the training program. Others described instances where he had questioned Sarah's qualifications and suggested that her presence was compromising the program's standards. The pattern that emerged painted a picture of systematic harassment that had been building toward the confrontation that finally occurred. Morrison's actions weren't an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of weeks of resentment and hostility that he had been expressing to anyone who would listen. Captain Hayes found herself dealing with a situation that went beyond a simple training accident. The evidence suggested a deliberate attempt to intimidate and potentially harm a fellow service member based on gender bias. Such behavior was not only contrary to military values but potentially criminal depending on the specific charges that might be filed. The reputation of the SEAL training program itself was at stake, as any suggestion that female candidates were being subjected to harassment or discrimination would bring unwanted scrutiny from higher command levels and potentially from Congress and the media. The formal disciplinary hearing took place 3 days after the incident, giving Captain Hayes time to complete her investigation and consult with higher command about the appropriate response. The proceedings were held in the base's main conference room, with a panel consisting of Captain Hayes, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, and Colonel Marcus Thompson from the Marine Corps Liaison Office serving as an independent observer. Morrison, Williams, and Thompson sat at one table with their appointed counsel, a military defense attorney who had arrived from Naval Station Norfolk. Their demeanor was subdued, as the weight of their situation had become increasingly clear over the past few days. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and their military careers hung in the balance. Sarah sat at a separate table, accompanied by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, who was serving as her advocate. Sarah's bearing was composed and professional, showing none of the nervousness that might be expected from someone involved in such serious proceedings. Her confidence came from knowing that she had acted properly according to her training and that the evidence supported her version of events. Captain Hayes opened the hearing by reading the formal charges against the 3 cadets. Morrison faced the most serious accusations, including violation of weapons, safety protocols, harassment of a fellow service member, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. Williams and Thompson faced similar charges but with lesser degrees of culpability based on their roles as followers rather than instigators. The presentation of evidence was methodical and damning. Security camera footage showed the 3 cadets removing safety markings from their weapons and discussing their plan to target Sarah specifically. Audio recordings captured Morrison's derogatory comments about female service members and his stated intention to make Sarah cry during the exercise. Medical testimony confirmed that Morrison's actions could have caused serious injury had Sarah not defended herself. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the base's emergency medicine physician, explained that firing blank ammunition at close range to someone's head could cause permanent hearing loss, severe burns, or traumatic eye injuries from the muzzle blast and hot gases expelled from the weapon. The actions of these cadets created a genuine risk of serious bodily harm, Dr. Martinez testified. Lieutenant Martinez's defensive response likely prevented what could have been a tragic training accident with permanent consequences. When called upon to testify, Sarah's account of the incident was clear and factual. She explained her assessment of the threat, her decision-making process, and the specific techniques she had used to neutralize what she perceived as hostile action. Her testimony demonstrated not only her tactical competence but also her emotional control under extreme pressure. "At what point did you decide that lethal force might be necessary?" Captain Hayes asked. "Ma'am, I never considered lethal force. My training taught me to use the minimum force necessary to neutralize a threat. When I saw weapons pointed at my head with apparent intent to fire, I used non-lethal techniques to disarm and disable the threat, while preserving the lives and long-term health of the individuals involved." Morrison's testimony was far less convincing. He continued to claim that his actions were intended as legitimate training, but his explanation fell apart under questioning when he couldn't explain why he had violated multiple safety protocols or why he had specifically targeted Sarah rather than conducting such tests on male candidates. "Cadet Morrison, can you explain why you felt it was necessary to remove the safety markings from your weapon if this was a legitimate training exercise?" Colonel Thompson asked. Morrison's answer was rambling and contradictory. "Sir, we wanted to make it more realistic. We thought that if she saw the orange markings, she would know it wasn't real and wouldn't react properly. But you understand that those markings exist specifically to prevent the kind of confusion that could lead to serious injury or death?" "Yes, sir, but we weren't planning to hurt anyone. We just wanted to see if she could handle the pressure." The defense attorney attempted to portray the incident as a case of poor judgment rather than malicious intent, arguing that the cadets were young men who had made a serious mistake but shouldn't have their careers ended because of one incident. However, the evidence of premeditation and the pattern of harassment that had preceded the confrontation made this argument difficult to sustain. Character witnesses were called for both sides. Several instructors testified about Sarah's exceptional performance throughout the training program, her professionalism under pressure, and her positive relationships with other candidates. Multiple cadets spoke about Morrison's pattern of negative comments about female service members and his frequently expressed opinion that women shouldn't be allowed in SEAL training. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez provided perhaps the most compelling testimony about the incident itself. "In 23 years of training special operations candidates, I have never seen a more clear-cut case of appropriate defensive action. Lieutenant Martinez identified a genuine threat, neutralized it efficiently, and ensured the safety of everyone involved, including her attackers. Her actions demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and skill we expect from Navy SEALs." The hearing concluded with closing arguments from both sides. The prosecution emphasized the serious nature of the safety violations and the clear evidence of harassment based on gender. The defense continued to argue for leniency based on the cadets' youth and previously clean records. Captain Hayes called for a recess to deliberate with her panel before announcing their findings. The atmosphere in the room was tense as everyone waited for a decision that would determine the future of 4 military careers. Sarah remained calm throughout the wait, confident that justice would be served based on the facts rather than any bias or political considerations. When the panel reconvened after 2 hours of deliberation, Captain Hayes' expression was stern as she prepared to announce their decision. The moment had arrived that would determine whether the military's commitment to equal treatment and safety would be upheld or undermined by the actions of 3 cadets who had chosen intimidation over respect. Captain Hayes stood as she prepared to deliver the panel's decision, her voice carrying the weight of military authority and moral clarity. The room fell silent as every person present understood that this moment would have consequences far beyond the individuals directly involved. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony presented, this panel finds Cadet James Morrison guilty of all charges, including violation of weapons safety protocols, harassment of a fellow service member, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. Cadets Williams and Thompson are found guilty of the same charges but with reduced culpability based on their roles as accomplices rather than instigators. Morrison's face went pale as the full impact of the decision hit him. His military career, which he had worked years to build, was effectively over. Williams and Thompson showed similar reactions as they realized their futures had been permanently altered by their decision to follow Morrison's lead. The sentence for Cadet Morrison is immediate dismissal from the Naval Special Warfare Training Program, reduction in rank to seaman recruit, and administrative separation from the United States Navy with an other than honorable discharge. Cadets Williams and Thompson are dismissed from the training program, reduced in rank, and will face administrative review to determine their fitness for continued naval service. The severity of the punishment sent a clear message throughout the military community. Harassment and discrimination would not be tolerated, regardless of the perpetrator's previous service record or the victim's gender. The panel had chosen to make an example that would deter future incidents and protect the integrity of the SEAL training program. Lieutenant Martinez. Captain Hayes continued, "This panel finds that your actions were completely justified and consistent with your training and the threat you faced. Your response demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical skill, judgment, and restraint that we expect from Navy SEALs. You will continue in the training program with a commendation for your professional conduct under extreme circumstances." The official proceedings concluded, but the impact of the incident continued to reverberate through the training facility. Sarah's classmates, who had initially been divided in their opinions about her capabilities, now viewed her with universal respect. She had proven herself not through political correctness or special consideration, but through her ability to handle a genuine crisis with the skill of a true professional warrior. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's reputation spread beyond the training facility. Her story became a case study in military academies about appropriate defensive action and the importance of maintaining professionalism under pressure. More importantly, it served as a powerful deterrent to anyone who might consider using intimidation or harassment against female service members. The 3 dismissed cadets faced different fates after leaving the training program. Morrison struggled to find civilian employment, as his other-than-honorable discharge became a permanent mark on his record. Williams and Thompson, after completing additional training and demonstrating genuine remorse for their actions, were eventually allowed to continue their naval careers in other specialties, though neither would ever be eligible for special operations training. Sarah completed her SEAL training with distinction, finishing in the top 5% of her class in overall performance. Her tactical skills, leadership abilities, and unflappable composure under pressure earned her the respect of instructors and fellow candidates alike. The incident that was meant to break her had instead proven her worthiness to wear the Navy SEAL trident. Following graduation, Sarah was assigned to SEAL Team 7, where she quickly established herself as a valuable operator. Her first deployment took her back to Afghanistan, where she participated in several high-value target missions that resulted in significant intelligence breakthroughs. Her ability to remain calm under fire and make sound tactical decisions saved lives and contributed to mission success on multiple occasions. Years later, as a senior petty officer leading training exercises for new SEAL candidates, Sarah would often reflect on the incident that had nearly derailed her career. She used it as a teaching moment for both male and female candidates, emphasizing that true strength came not from intimidation or aggression, but from professional competence and the ability to respond appropriately to genuine threats. The story of the cadets who aimed a weapon at her head became legendary within the special operations community, serving as both a cautionary tale about the consequences of harassment and an inspiring example of how proper training and mental toughness could overcome any challenge. Sarah Martinez had proven that courage, skill, and professionalism were not determined by gender, but by character and preparation. Her legacy extended beyond her own achievements to pave the way for future generations of women in special operations. The incident had demonstrated that female candidates could not only meet the same standards as their male counterparts, but could exceed them when the situation demanded excellence. The 3 cadets who had sought to expose her weakness had instead revealed her exceptional strength, creating a story that would inspire military personnel for decades to come. The training facility where it all began now displays a plaque commemorating the importance of mutual respect and professional conduct among service members. Sarah's name appears on the facility's honor roll, not as a victim who had overcome adversity, but as a warrior who had proven herself worthy of standing among America's most elite fighting forces. The incident that was intended to end her career had instead launched a legacy of excellence that would define her for the rest of her military service.